Yo, what is going on, everybody? This is Brandon.
Stefan.
Welcome back to Comics Kings. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome everybody to Crisis on Infinite Rants. This is the show where we take a topic every week. We talk about it, dive deep into the conversation. Also want to mention today is Whiplash Wednesday. We are the closing show. So if you guys did not catch all of the other content creators out, we had Nick Comic Culture dropping us at 11 a.m. with his store exclusive preview. The Cadets. So make sure you guys go check that out. And then we actually saw Herm and Fable with their edited video of when they first met. So that was a very special video that if you're going to watch anything from this rewind of Whiplash Wednesday, watch that.
Worth it,
leave a comment, right? Because it was the first time they met. It was great. And, you know, they went to see a lot of New York City. You got to see a lot of New York City. You got to see a lot of Midtown, a lot of toys, a lot of bro moments. So fantastic. And then we had Travis chatting with Adrian, so actual Dracula, who's an amazing person. So make sure you guys go check that out as well. Great conversation. We had Nick again showing us his new Comic Book Day haul, and this was a huge week. So make sure you guys go check that out and let Nick know of all the Marvel books he did not pick up. I guarantee you there were a lot. And then we got Herm talking with Sam Sega Webb about super villains, right? In between the big two. So that was a great conversation. As always, everyone's favorite duo. Now we're here. The final show, we actually have a special guest, guys. He's returned to the show. One of my favorite people to talk to, the artist on Excalibur, one of my favorite books on the shelves right now, wearing the best Robin's hat, Marcus Toe.
Tim Drake.
I had to flip it back on. I flipped it on while we were, in the back.
Yep. He knew what to do. He knew to do.
He's being a good friend. We know it's Tim Drake.
Marcus, thank you so much for coming on last minute, man.
No problem. Happy to be here. My brain is a little fried today, so if I blank out for a little bit, that's my excuse.
Well, you got the hat on. You know, Nightwing never blanks out. You know,
No.
That's why he's the best Robin. But anyway, thank you to everybody in the chat. Let's give him the rundown. We got Travis in here. What is going on, brother? Part of the PCB Army. Bad. Scroll all the way up because the chat jumped. We got Eric in here first, followed by Steven. We have Nicole in here. We got Caroline, who's building Legos, I know. We got Real Rude in the house. What is going on, Real Rude? And I believe we got Adam in here, right? Giving Marcus some fire because we didn't really promote this at all. And I'm glad you're here, Marcus. I really am. Today's conversation, you guys, we're going to be talking about how can the big two make side characters more relevant? How can we elevate their status? So kind of treating kind of going back to what the champions originally started as, right? And kind of what the Teen Titans nowadays, I hate to say isn't, but kind of what it used to be. Because I've noticed in comics more recently, a lot of these characters that are kind of younger, right, and are overshadowed by their older character. Hence, like Kamala Khan and Captain Marvel, right? You kind of have that overshadowing. One is obviously has a better creative team, more issues, right, and gets put in the Marvel advertisement. Meanwhile, one of them is getting a TV show soon. So I want to talk about how can we make these characters feel like to their audience, and kind of dive deep into the subject. So what are your guys' thoughts so far?
Well, I'll go first if you guys don't mind. But I think a big portion of pushing characters or getting people to learn about new characters, whether it be an unknown or a supporting character, is I think a lot of it ties down to the creative team. Fans, readers put a lot of trust in certain writers, artists, creative teams. So it's like if you were to take an unknown character and put one of the biggest writers, biggest artists on it, or a complimentary writer, complimentary artist, they're going to be like, oh, if that person's writing the book or that person's drawing the book, that character must be cool. Like that character must have an edge. You brought up champions earlier, Mark Waid, Humberto Ramos. Those are really like characters that I don't want to say no one would care about, but the fact that they put such an established creative team on it definitely shows the interest that or faith that Marvel had in that brand. I think creative teams play a big part in garnering interest in unknown characters.
So, Link, do you say that they lost that sense, especially with that brand right now?
It's a little hit or miss, but yeah, I think the last couple of years, it's if hey, this cliche, but put Donny Cates on a character like Sleepwalker. No one really knows who Sleepwalker is, but you put him on there, people are like, oh, I'm going to check that out just because of like the branding and stuff like that.
Right. Marcus, what are your thoughts?
I think to add to what Steph was saying is true, but I think knowing the audience that likes those characters and then matching the creative team with those that know how to cater to that audience is important, I believe, because I think that using Mark Waid and Humberto Ramos for Champions was a great kind of example of that, where both of them I think really understand those characters and what makes them popular. While there's been times in the past where they have added a creative team that just didn't seem to fit, even though they were a big name, but no one really wanted to see that creator on that specific character. Donny Cates is an interesting kind of example too, though, because while Venom and that side of the Spider-Man universe was popular in the 90s, they kind of fell off the map for a long time, right? Until Donny Cates came and kind of reminded us why we liked them and unapologetically made it so, right? Because he understood why he was popular, right?
Absolutely.
And having Ryan Stegman on just really kind of like hammered that idea home.
Right.
Agreed.
What's going on, Jeremy? And what is going on, Chet? How are you guys doing today? But yeah, like you guys have been saying, the creative teams are very important, and a lot of times these characters get pushed due to the success of these creative teams. Now, I'm also going to use Nightwing as a great example because Tom Taylor, yes, he's a great writer, but Nightwing never really sold because of Dan DiDio's agenda, which he has come out several times post his departure, to put it like that, post his departure, to talk about why he didn't like characters like Wally West or characters like Dick Grayson, because they put certain heroes or certain characters in an age gap that they can't really escape. So as long as you have Nightwing in his early 20s, Bruce Wayne is going to be in his 50s.
Yeah.
Right? So combining the creative teams with editorial agenda, how do you think that they can compromise that relationship more? Now that DiDio is no longer there, look at what we have with the Nightwing character. He is now probably the most spoken book in DC right now. Next to Superman, right? That's another Tom Taylor book.
Right.
And as of lately, the Batman Urban Legends with Tim Drake. Like those kind of like hotter subjects. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I feel like that's a tough question because I'm not going to comment on Dan Didio's decisions,
situation,
but it is important to have obviously a higher up that kind of understands what you're trying to do. And I know it's easier said than done, though, because there are people that truly believe what Dan believes, or that is a strategy. That is a strategy to make. But DC has had such a wonderful history of allowing characters to kind of grow with generations. So you still have the character, like say Green Lantern or your Batman or whatever, and some of the best conversations, albeit somewhat times heated, is exactly kind of what Steph was joking about with Tim Drake and Dick Grayson, where you have your favorite version of that character, but a completely different character, right? Yep. And what I always worried was with the New 52 was that erased the entire history, that you kind of in one fell swoop you kind of eliminated kind of what made a lot of that special. Like, how many times have you talked with fans or friends and talked about how I like Guy Gardner better, or I like Kyle Rayner better? My guy is
I have never heard anyone say it like Guy Gardner
yeah.
better, but
I have, but I'm a little older than you guys, but but that's the fun of it. And then you can create books like Justice League International with all these side characters with a
Booster Gold, Blue Beetle. Guy was there.
Exactly.
You had a Black Canary on the team, basically leading it.
Right, and then that creative team found what that voice of those characters were, and then they moved on to I Can't Believe It's Not the Justice League, which was some of my favorite stories because it was comedy written, and not everything. That's the thing about comics, is as it expands, it has a base of the more traditional superhero comics, but now that you have all these extra characters, you can create genre within the genre, right? And that's something special that I feel like a lot of people seem to kind of argue against, which I never really understood, because how many of us can read every single thing on the shelves, right?
I know I can.
I mean, my pull list was about 20 books today, so I'm getting there.
Even a fraction. That's barely a fraction of what is out there, of what comes out. So
right. But kind of talking on that side, like the publication and how comics are made. So we see DC right now having like 10 Batman. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but it also doesn't feel like an exaggeration. You have X amount of Batman books. Like when I say Batman, I don't mean like, okay, Nightwing, Batgirl, blah, 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 Harley Quinn. I mean like Batman-centric books.
Batman
like
Reptilian.
Bruce Wayne,
Legends,
Batman Reptilian, Urban
Detective.
Legends, the Detective Comics, Batman.
Yeah.
Which one just came out? Imposter, Batcat. That's
the Imposter. Yeah.
So obviously Batman sells. Like anytime Marvel has a chance to put out a Spider-Man book or a Batman book, like even though nonstop Spider-Man is kind of like still in delays, it's still gonna sell better a lot more than some of your niche titles, such as like we mentioned Miss Marvel, simply because of the name. Now, when we go back and we look at the 90s, like you were talking about earlier, when we had Nightfall and we had Death of Superman, kind of in those span of years, then we had Grant Morrison's Justice League, which barely featured main characters at one point in their run, right? But that's when we got like Hippolyta to grow, we got Steel to grow, we got Kyle Rayner, that's my guy, Kyle Rayner, to grow. Okay, so do you guys think a lot of times we need to change the status quo to some of our older heroes? Because then you also have to keep it in mind other like Spider-Verse characters that are popular today, Spider-Gwen and Miles, have their own voice because of the Ultimate Universe, and then crossed over, still maintaining that same voice.
So
do you guys think that it's necessary to like change the status quo of a character in a universe, or like a main character in a specific universe, make it like an Elseworld story to kind of grow that fan base for kind of like a Miles Morales or a Kamala Khan?
I don't think you necessarily need to make it like an alternate universe or Elseworld story, but it certainly doesn't hurt to shake things up. You were using Grant Morrison's JLA as an example, like Bendis' New Avengers. It had the populars like Cap, Iron Man. Well, I'll use those two. But then the people who had like the biggest character moments were people like Luke Cage, Jessica Jones. He used that as a vehicle to get Luke Cage's voice heard. So I think it definitely helps. It makes it easier for people to take a risk on a new character if they know that they've got some of the old faithfuls to fall back on. That doesn't mean it necessarily always works, but I think it's a way of appeasing, like a medium to. So it's like the old readers, they have their classic Avengers, but then you've got newer readers who like Wolverine and Spider-Man, and they can find them in one book. So it's definitely doesn't hurt to change things up once in a while if things have been stagnant.
Right, Marcus?
I wonder, because my mind always kind of drifts to on my side of things. I always hear things like things weren't selling, so we canceled it and this and that, and
right,
and we're kind of entering an age where ongoing titles is not really much of a thing. So you'll always have your Batmans and Spider-Mans that fall on, like those will always sell. And right now, obviously, Marvel has kind of reinvigorated the X-Men, and the X-Men is one of those prime examples of side characters becoming popular and then expanding upon itself. And how many X-Men teams were not the originals, or let's say, right? So it can be done. I always wonder, because when we started to do, say, New Warriors, and that was a tough one to do because the sales really didn't hit it off right off the beginning, right at the beginning. But on the flip side too, when I did Red Robin, coming off of Death of Batman, or R.I.P. Batman, whatever, I can't remember the title. Yeah, anyway. So if little story time, Tim Drake was supposed to die in that story arc. Not in my story arc, but pre-Red Robin, right?
No way.
So what saved him was an editor who was passionately pushed to make sure that didn't happen before she left DC to work at another studio. So like I'm curious to see what the rumor was. It was that she wrote this like essay like paper to Dan saying, this is why you shouldn't kill Tim Drake, and then that stayed the guillotine.
Yeah.
But that was also why he was kind of like, okay, we'll give him a side book, but he won't be a part of.
Disconnected from.
He'll be disconnected from the universe, kind of like Red Hood and the Outlaws.
Exactly.
So my next question is, who did not write the letter to keep Nightwing from being shot in the head? That's my next question. But
well, I'd argue at that point, a lot of those editors that had the courage to stand up to him were not there anymore.
Right.
So, not to say there are amazing editors at DC, like hands down some of the best people you'll know. But there was a certain expectation to follow the crowd after a certain point.
Right.
So at what point do we start defining the success in books like Young Avengers? We mentioned Champions earlier, or let's say Teen Titans, or even I'm gonna use this as a great example. If you guys have not read Robert Venditti's Hawkman, it went on for like 34 issues, which is pretty long for a Hawkman book. That was longer than Jeff Johns' Hawkman run. Which means that in this day and age, the sales justified the book. Correct. Look at Savage Avengers, which was a very niche team of Marvel characters, and then Conan, right? Mm-hmm. So at what point do we justify editorial taking a chance on keep printing that book and the trust in that creative team? Or are we just going to say it was 100% the creative team that cared about these characters and gave them that voice, right? I feel like at this point, we're kind of defining this as a dual-edged sword, where you need to have that trust with the editor, with the people in editorial to push for that book,
right?
And then the creative teams. And then I ask myself, so should we keep giving these books a shot in today's society?
I say so.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And if so, which characters would you push right now in today's society? Which characters which group do you guys think would have more of a mainstay audience?
I'm a big Young Avengers fan. For years, I think it was because Marvel had like a thing. It was like if a creator came up with a character, or maybe it was for DC as well, but if Alan Heinberg created the Young Avengers, so it was like Marvel's thing that only major plot story elements could happen with the Young Avengers under his writing. Like you'd see the Young Avengers appear in other books, but character changes, anything major would happen under a series he's penning. Now they've kind of loosened up on that lately, but like for years I was kind of, I wanted to see more Young Avengers, and so I'm glad that they're doing that. I would love to see Young Avengers push more as the brand I believe in. Young Justice, yeah.
I would love to see Young Justice, especially with the show coming back. I think that'd be perfect to give Bendis another shot.
But Savage Avengers, I believe, was only supposed to be a mini, and it ended up becoming a monthly. And it's not. I'm not too sure, but I don't think it's one of the best-selling titles. But Marvel saw that there's an audience and a fan base for that. So just because something's not selling or it's not necessarily popular, it doesn't mean it shouldn't be put out, because a book will find, it does. If it's not hitting, then maybe years later a book will find its audience, or it'll resonate with a certain group of readers. So it's important to just take chances. Just because it's not selling or it's not the most popular doesn't mean it's not quality.
Right. Go ahead, Marcus.
I was gonna say, like, I've been trying to champion Robin's book since the end of Tim, like, read Robin for forever, and I'm glad it's being made finally after all this time. But I don't know, like, there's and I'm a big Booster Gold fan. I really loved when not New 52, but 52 was happening, and
yes.
that run of characters that were a lot lesser known.
Yep.
Grant Morrison's Seven Soldiers of Fortune was really, really awesome how they did it. How they combined the mini series of 7 different books into one event.
Right.
That was pretty amazing.
Yeah. So I love that storyline. That's I think it's one of the best event. I don't know if you want to call it an event, but I like those minis all tied into each other and led to an overall larger picture. And these were not characters I was familiar with when I was reading it at the time. The Bulleteer, Frankenstein, but they were all awesome,
and that's a great way of utilizing side characters to create something that people want to read. I mean, also, Justice League Unlimited did an awesome job, kind of like having an overarching season, and then side characters like the Question and stuff like that play pivotal roles, even though maybe they were not the hero, quote unquote, of the story in the end of the movie or the show. You could argue that they were, but they played their part, and you followed along with what that was, and you learned about them. So I mean, I feel like there's a lot of story techniques in incorporating side characters to make sure that we learn more about them than the heroes. So
absolutely.
Also, and I think this is noteworthy, I was looking at this beautiful omnibus in front of me, which is James Tynion's Batman, the Detective Comics run, which barely featured Batman. I think that's the only Detective Comic story where I can say did not really feature much Bruce Wayne as Batman. It was and I know Marcus loves this book. I know Marcus champions this story because it featured Tim Drake as the leader with characters like Clayface. You had Batwoman. You had Spoiler in there.
Cassie.
So, you had Cassie in there. And then also I was thinking about New Avengers that Bendis did, right? Yeah. And how Bendis was able to play. There was a lot of Hawkeye at the time, which was a very niche character, right? Making him run, and then Echo, again, kind of still niche at the time, right? You had Jessica Drew being heavily influenced in the whole Secret Invasion plot. Yeah. Right, Elektra's kind of a popular side character, but she's still a side character. And you had Luke Cage and Jessica Jones that we touched on earlier. So, do you think at some point the people who are writing these stories need to say, "Hey, maybe I should take a chance on X, Y, and Z character"? Also, I would do it a disservice to mention that it was probably the biggest Sentry story we've had since his creation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but maybe who knows how much a creator is allowed to, we don't know the full story. Maybe editor is very strict and certain, stories like we want you to use these characters only, because we're pushing those characters. So it's like a creative team might want to throw a character in there, but they're not allowed to. They have to work with what they're given.
Right. I have a side story. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to say who, but I've heard stories of, and I know because I was in the room, of people, some people saying, you got to have this character be here, but you can't use the character that lives in this city. And you're like, why? Well, because this, because that, or they'd be saying like, you got to have this person on the cover, and then you're like, well, why do we need this person in the cover? Well, we're gonna have him in there. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me what the story is then. And it's like, we haven't written it yet. So there are people that really do believe that, like, they have to control the story through, the arcs, and there are times when you just can't get, like, even when your story is approved,
right,
they'll come and say, like, throw that person in there, and like, well, that doesn't go with anything of my story. But that's the risk we all take working on, big two or any property that is not ours, right? You kind of have to, you have a lot of discussions about it. Is a business, and we get paid in a lot of ways. We get paid a premium to just walk away from it at the end of the day. And so that's why you see, a lot of people kind of choosing to go a different route, and that's okay. There's always, like, if you worked on, I don't know, what's the latest Disney movie, you don't own that character, you work for X amount of years, you get paid, you walk away, and that's just it, right?
Yep.
Right. So you were, Marcus, you were on the side of kind of looking at how fans perceive your work a lot of times. What is it kind of like juggling all of, like, a bunch of cast of 7 characters and giving that attention to each of those characters?
I mean, that's tough. Like, a lot of it is I take cues from the writer. Right. So, I mean, a lot of the decisions are obviously through the writer, but it is really tricky, because even something small, and I've been criticized for not putting a character in a group shot that they thought should have been there, or, why is this character in their mind not living up to their, potential, let's say.
Right.
And while, I understand that, because that's the passion of fans, they want to see their character succeed. That's just natural. I don't really take it sensitive or too personally. But let's be honest with you, I'm like Michael Jordan. I take that personally. But besides that, I mean, it is a difficult juggling act, and you just kind of have to know what the story is about, because in the end of the day, like, I know where we're going with the story, and if that happens the way we've done it, I think we've succeeded. Even if people say, I wanted to see more Gambit, let's say, I wanted to see more Jubilee.
Richter.
Yeah, Richter.
Or a more stubborn Richter.
Sorry. Right. and maybe those moments weren't there, but, sometimes the story really is just about that one character, even on the team book, so
absolutely. Yep.
Sometimes I think the way I like to read stories is very passively. Like, I try not to, unless if it's comics where I'm trying to actually break it down, I always try to think of what's trying to be said to me, right? And then you're passively allowing the story to happen into yourself instead of imposing what you believe in it. Now, I know that's not everybody, but that's how I try to watch movies. That's how I try to read books. Yeah. And then I try to sit there and think, did the writer achieve the task that was telling that story to me, regardless of who I thought should have done what.
Right.
And I think that where we are at with kind of big 2 books is, it's kind of a two-headed monster, because, like, on one hand, you're throwing these characters in there to sell the book, obviously. This is a book with your favorite character, and then you don't get to see them do their favorite thing. Kind of, that's kind of tricky.
Well, a lot of times we see said characters, right, only when Nola's around, or only when War of the Realms is around, then we'll get that. But we do sometimes get cool little niche teams like the Agents of Atlas, which is people are saying is going to be very important, which I can say it is. As long as Greg Pak stays doing that, it'll be a very important concept and a very important team. Right, Greg Pak, someone else who wrote Champions and did a very did he write? No, that was Jim Zub.
Yeah, I was gonna say Zub.
Do that. Greg Pak did something else that I can't think of. Not Hulk, but he did something else that I cannot think of for the.
But he did do Hulk. No, I'm just kidding.
He did do Hulk. He did do Amadeus Cho for a very long time. So that was great. You know, that's again making a niche character to the forefront. So at what point do we say, how can we? A lot of times, businessmen say this character won't sell over, let's say, a bigger fish, right? Like, for example, Amadeus Cho will never outsell Bruce Banner. But a lot of times, if you have that drive with that character, with Amadeus Cho or with a team, let's use Strike Force that Teeny Howard did, which was a great book. I think that was the first time we saw Blue Marvel with since Al Ewing in the Ultimate.
I love that lineup.
Which again, that was a niche team at the time.
Yeah.
Right? At what point do businessmen use the flip side saying, wait, maybe they're not getting a whole lot of attention, so let's use that with a good creative team to drive that character and create that excitement, which I think right now DC is doing a whole lot more than Marvel. And I can't believe I've actually said that. But
when you say businessmen, though, like that, businessmen are kind of, the goal is money at the end of the day. So if a character's not really worth the money or the risk, why not just keep pumping out books that you know are going to guarantee? I mean, that's the mindset of a businessman. I don't see them really thinking like fans, saying take the risk, you know, this character could sell. They want like a sure thing. They want.
So I'm going to throw this out to you guys because I saw the question being asked about will we ever see an Ultimate Universe again?
I hope so. I love
DC. But it's tough to guess that because I don't know if you guys remember, but during the time of the Ultimate Universe, no one expected that Spider-Man to sell. Absolutely no one.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until Spider-Man was selling that everyone's like, "Wow, we got to do X-Men now. We got to do Ultimates now, right?" And from that time period, I might be dating myself, but during that time period, like Marvel,
Stefan does it all the time.
Yeah, Marvel was, Marvel was almost bankrupt multiple times, and at the time they were literally throwing everything at the wall. If someone had an idea, they're like, "Go for it," and someone like whatever, right?
And a lot of great things came from that.
Exactly. Even Marvel Knights kind of came out of that. Even though that didn't necessarily last as long as the Ultimates did, but
the concept, it was almost like a DC Rebirth concept.
Yeah, exactly. But on the really just the street level characters, they did that, which was awesome, because you could utilize little pockets of your own universe to create kind of like a version or a style or a series of stories. And Ultimate Universe was a kind of really interesting time period too, because it was a way to, because I think Spider-Man at the time was really bland. Like we just came out of that that weird
clone Ben Reilly.
No, even that I felt like was, at least it was kind of weird and different. I'm talking about like
when Ultimate Spider-Man was there, we're kind of in Brand New Day mode.
Yeah,
no, that was before.
And I think
we're coming
what
out
was
of
the one where he was like a god or something, like he was like a spider god, and there's all these animals.
Was
that with like that Ezekiel guy?
JMS
did with
JMS.
Who was the artist?
Right.
JMS did it with, I think it was JR.
Yeah, it could have been JR, I believe.
It wasn't Deodato.
He was cycling.
It was JR. Tell by the webbing, if I remember.
And so having a Spider-Man go back to, like, I think, don't quote me on this because I was still kind of a fan at this point. It was literally there. Oh yeah, well, secretly. But you like they kind of wanted to obviously retell, and I think what's his name had Brian Michael Bendis had the thinking, because he at the time he was kind of like I can write children, I can write that kind of new age at the time early 2000s dialogue. And they just let him do it. So and I think they were trying to market to like the kids again. And it blew up. So I think when you try to do something different, sometimes the best is to try another audience, or at least aim for a new audience, because then you'll have a wider range of options to go about, and that can open up a lot of creative doors that maybe you would feel chained to if you assumed at least marketing to the kind of the same people that you
the
always
classic,
do.
Yeah.
Right, but
Absolutely.
even today in comics, you still have like a Teen Titans book, and you still have Champions.
Mm-hmm.
Champions got canceled.
Yeah.
Teen Titans, in my opinion, is not doing great. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't what that book set out for.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, I mean, they're still trying to engage those audiences, but it's not really in like a fresher kind of vibe.
I think it's also because that
I'm not trying to crap on those books, but you know, let's be honest, it didn't have the same drive that, let's say, Jeff Johns did, or I'll even say Ben Percy did when he was on the book, when he did Teen Titans, or who did it after Mark Waid? It was Jim Zub, you know, and who else was on it? Eve Ewing, who did the Riri series, you know. So, and back to the Ultimate Universe thing, DC right now is doing a lot of Elseworld stories, right? They're kind of expanding, they're tapping into their Omniverse right now, and that is kind of allowing them to utilize a lot of stories like Superman and the Authority, a concept that was in Grant's Action Comics from back then, and their Superman. But then you also have like books like Justice League Last Ride, which is using Cyborg, it's using Lobo, right? But you also have a book like Crushing Lobo, still using the same character, but it's not marketed as highly. But that's by a Eisner-winning writer, Murkio Tamaki, who is one of the more consistent writers in comic books today, right? So back what you were saying, I would say that yes, I would love to see an Ultimate Universe. I think Al Ewing has always kind of hinted, in my opinion, where you were talking about what does the book speak to me. To me, Al Ewing says, I want the Ultimate Universe back. He keeps using concepts that are very Ultimate Universe-esque. Like the Maker is throughout, I think, almost every single one of his books, except for Immortal Hulk, right? But that's even utilizing a lot of newer sci-fi concepts, right?
But it's a good point about the Ultimate Universe, Marcus. But they were taking a chance at the time, you know. There was a lot of people that didn't think it was going to work, didn't want those books coming out.
Yeah.
But they took a chance and they found their audience. Like I was 12 when Ultimate Spider-Man came out. I was one of those target audience members that that Ultimate Universe really resonated with me, you know. And so I was
my partner. Sorry, we share a
condo.
Yeah. They're on a show.
This is a true first appearance.
But
this is the price of living in a condo. It's a so anyway. Sorry, go on. Yes.
That they took a chance and it worked. So it's like they maybe should apply that to other books. Like maybe it's not gonna resonate or hit with the older readers, but there are newer readers that will appeal to.
Here, I'll throw this to you too. This is the right combination as well of like, because while Mark Bagley is a veteran in our industry, even at that time that it was on Spider-Man, he wasn't one of the top creators of the time. But you matched the perfect person that understands Spider-Man and can draw it regularly to the point where he was like the longest. That was an incredible, unheard of, and we'll probably never see that run again of an artist going through that timeline. But
Steve Epting too, I would say, is up there.
Yeah, but like kind of matching up to, they knew that they could make that run with this guy, with Mark, and have it go for a while if they needed to. He could hit his deadline so they can make sure that book comes out all the time. But they all when they went also to Ultimate X-Men, was it Adam or Andy? Adam, right?
I believe it.
I
get him confused, but
it wasn't Joe. It wasn't Joe.
No, I know that. but then they're very regular too. So they made sure that those books were on the stands every single month, and I think that combined with kind of that target audience of a young reader that is still kind of finding its way into, or their way into, comics, and having it regular a regular artist to depend upon,
Yeah.
that adds a lot to it too. And here's the thing about how I feel about, say, Teen Titans, and I haven't read Teen Titans since Jeff Johns was on it, mind you, but I think that there is a disconnect between maybe the creators and the editorial staff and the fans that actually, read would like those characters, not necessarily read the book, but would like those characters. And sometimes a lot of people seem to forget that, especially there, certain styles will attract a certain person.
Absolutely.
And I really feel like there was a miss of, if you could find someone with a relative anime style, I don't mean just drawing anime, but like, that type of K-pop,
that flair, yeah.
that flair can appeal to fans of the Teen Titans, because I've grown up in this industry in that realm of the Robins, and I've heard and seen, and I know what's popular, because you could see a lot of the fan art that is on the more popular side. Like there's this creator from China that I know. Her name is Haining. She does these amazing, very Asian inspired. Well, she is Asian, so it's not Asian inspired. It's her style,
Asian.
right?
It's her style.
But I felt like looks like that could really fit into what would make that book sell.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
Based on the fan base that likes those characters already.
Right.
Highly agree.
Well, 100%.
Manga and anime are on the rise, so clearly that's an audience. There's an audience there that is,
and
like you were saying,
and a lot of young people grow up reading manga first.
Yep.
Right.
Especially in today's day and age. No, not
and,
you, but you're...
and you can transition them from that with a book that's geared towards them with a similar style, and then once they kind of like those characters, they can reach out to others that isn't that style, right? So, but if you're trying to go for young people and to know that they're already kind of liking that style, giving them access to one that looks similar to what they're comfortable with. We're all creatures of habit. If things are too out of, especially right off the bat, if there's too many things that are way too different, you don't like it.
Yeah.
You need to kind of like have a transition period of understanding, there's other types of art out there, and they're equally as great. But that does take time, and experience.
Right. Born Hitman 47 says, again, given the success of comic book movies, at least DC and Marvel would have the capital to have lots of series, some experimental / new, others more standard for those set preferences, which comics, I wouldn't say the representation in movies is a direct translation. I know we were mentioning Kamala Khan earlier, but like I would say Marvel more now that Kevin Feige is kind of like saying, hey, I know these guys are gonna be in MCU, let's push them a little more, right? Which we're seeing that with Kate Bishop more recently. We have an Echo-based series right now, which I haven't.
Phoenix, isn't she?
Yeah, she's Phoenix, but I haven't checked that out. I believe that was coming off Jason Aaron's Phoenix
Avengers,
thing.
Yeah.
But you would, a lot of times, right, comics are selling right now. They're selling pretty well considering the pandemic. Like people thought at one point when Diamond shut down, at least my shop did, like, okay, comic books are going to decline. And DC was even at a point saying, we're only going to publish a Trinity. They make this like whole thing. We're not there yet. We're not there. Right.
Yeah.
So that says, and even now graphic novels are on the rise. So I think that's pushing those miniseries that like Marvel's been doing, like with Kazar right now that's out, Black Knight that is out, right, that already finished, which I read that, and Cy Spurrier did a fantastic job. I loved it. I think everyone should read that book. But it's also the point where we're also in a very heavy variant market where shops a lot of times are ordering books that have those incentive covers just so they can make their money back should someone buy that big book. Right.
Well, this is the thing about our industry. It's not just one thing, right? There is a collector's aspect of it that is a very strong one. There's the story aspect. There's the movie aspect. There's so many parts. And one thing that a lot of people don't know is that literally the movies and the comics don't have anything to do with each other because they're completely separate departments. And this is from my experience. Just to give you an example, I did some work for Warner Brothers Canada, which their job or their department is more focused on the video games of Warner Brothers. So things like Injustice and the new Gotham Knights, I think it's that new game.
Yep.
So they're involved with that. Did you know that they have never spoken to anyone in DC Comics ever? They needed me to introduce them to editors and people from that side. And also Warner Brothers, like USA, other than their paychecks, I would argue, and maybe their boss, they have no connection between the two companies. And this is just, even literally a Warner Brothers company,
that's wild,
has no contact with the other. And I think it's just because it's like, your job is this, just do this, and then that's it.
If you're in the film department, your job is to make the best Kamala Khan film. You may go back and reference a book, but you're not going to, most times you're not going to directly and say, hey, Saladin Ahmed, you're writing this book, what do you see in it? Or who else did, or G. Willow Wilson was the one who I think, who had the biggest run on Kamala Khan. They're not going to say, hey, you're not going to, what's going on here? But I know, and a lot of times it's why the movies aren't a direct offspring. So it takes a special character like Kevin Feige, who you can tell grew up reading the books. Or I would even go as far as say Zack Snyder has shows flares of knowledge, but not directly saying, hey Marv, or hey Marv, you did a Christ on Infinite Earths, blah blah blah. Right? How can we turn this into a movie? Right? So to say that, like, obviously, like, to generate, you want, like, when you were talking about getting to an audience, you're gonna say, okay, this movie's popular, how can we, like, kind of show this character in the comics? But they're not gonna go on the same wavelength. This character might do their other adventures, but this one is just gonna follow their status quo in the movies, right? And we're gonna see that with Kate Bishop, right? If you think that Echo's gonna come in as the character she was when she first appeared in Daredevil #9, you're wrong, because they're bringing her in as Ronin. That's already been confirmed. So, she's already coming in, technically, like, what, 4 or 5 years into her comic term, right? Essentially. So they're not gonna go back and say, hey David, what did you? And a lot of times, right? I'll use this as an example, right? David Aja, they barely, or like when they do the credits, right? Like Lee Garbett in what movie, in the I think it was the Loki, didn't even know his name was gonna be there, right? Lee Garbett didn't know that, or David Aja, right? With Hawkeye, they completely used his thing, but they didn't contact him.
Right.
They copy and pasted his concept art
from
the cover.
They'll never contact the artist. I'll also say that we're the last ones to know anything,
right?
Which is why it's kind of funny, because I mean, I sometimes get crap for something like for DC. They were like, why did you draw Dick Grayson so tall? I was like, I don't know. I thought he was tall. Was he not tall? And don't get me wrong, I'm like, hey, look, man, I want to do a good job, but sometimes people don't tell me, and if the editor doesn't catch it, it's good to go.
Right.
But then again, it also goes hand in hand, right? Because you're gonna see a character like Kate Bishop on the big screens in about a month and a half from now, right? A month and a half. A month. Right, a month.
Kate Bishop, less than a month,
Right. So obviously, you're gonna get those readers that are gonna go back and buy their trades. Right?
Well,
they're gonna want. You would
hope.
That's the main goal.
That's the main goal.
That's the hope, is we can have these movies be a revenue to the comics. Because the other way around, obviously, people who are already fans are going to watch it. You don't need to appease these people.
Right.
You don't need to reinvigorate Matt Fraction's Hawkeye, because we've already seen it. That
story's been told already.
Right.
At Brian K. Vaughan and Cliff Chang's panel at Baltimore, when they were talking about Paper Girls, they said they didn't want the directors to really talk to them much. They wanted them to do their own thing for Paper Girls, because we already saw it in a comic book.
Absolutely.
We haven't seen it on the big screen.
My experience is that too. I'm right now in talks about something that could be something, but I can't talk about it. but my feeling is the same way. It's literally just to be like, look, I told my part of it. You know, you have you are
freedom.
Hollywood. Yeah, you're the you know how to write a movie. I don't know how to write a movie. Okay,
right.
If what changes need to be made to make it work in this medium,
right,
it's you are the pro in this situation.
Right. But for our conversation is how can we combine a business decision for a character? At the end of the day, you're not going to put a character in that you don't think is going to sell, right? How can I put this character in this story or give them this story to generate an audience?
I mean, that in itself is tough too, because like story should drive the you know thing, and but you know, we do have our favorite characters we want to see more. It's just, is there someone out there that has something that they want to say with that character, and if they're good? So that's a tough one, because there's so many characters that you could use, right?
So do you think that more big name creators are going for those bigger projects and less of looking out for those smaller characters, or do you think it's more of an editorial saying, hey, we were talking about Donny Cates earlier, so I'll use his name in conversation, got his start on really Guardians of the Galaxy. I would say Doctor Strange he got his start on in Marvel. Brought in Bats the dog, so that there's a reason why Bats the dog was in the recent Thor issue. For everyone who read that. But then went to Guardians, and then Inhuman did like a Death of Inhumans thing. Thanos, which again in comics today, I would say a Thanos series-esque book, right? Thanos appearing in another book is not like uncommon, but Thanos getting his own series is rare. I would say. I would say that's like more fitting in. I would put that into the side character thing. Thanos in his own series is a side character more than he is in an Avengers book. Right? I think that's pretty safe to say.
Yeah.
But then Venom, like we said, that's so really Donny got his voice in those smaller roles. Because Doctor Strange has never been that big of a seller.
No.
Unfortunately, it's never been that big of a seller. So which sucks. He's one of my favorites. But now he's going on to Hulk. Do you think that's an editorial to say, hey, Donny, you got to go over there, do a character that has been our best seller for going on 3 years now, next to Hickman's X-Men, of course, because and Marcus Toe's Excalibur, you know that guy. But
no, I don't know if Excalibur was was a big seller or nothing, but it lasted long. But I mean, here's the thing, that's a tough one to ask, because you don't know. It could be anything from maybe at this point the creator now has more say because he's popular. And then he said, maybe I want to write the Hulk next or something.
Right.
But at the same time, too, some might like, lesser known characters, because you do have more freedom to kind of do what you want with lesser known characters. So I don't know. It really, I think it depends on the person.
Right. And then I see the Miles Morales book, which is a great book, which started out great. The first 12 issues had a very solid team, Saladin Ahmed and Javier Garrón, which personally, I feel like that book fell off once Garrón left to go to Avengers, kind of doing that bigger project, because his covers, really, that's what drew me into the book mostly, right? Was his covers. I don't know if you guys have looked at them, but they're fans. They were like, I think they were some of the best covers I've ever seen. I made it a notion just to not really buy them for the cover, because like I love Miles, but the covers are
it appealed you.
They were pretty gnarly. They were dope. I'm just gonna say that they were dope.
Yeah.
But once he left, I feel like the book lost footing. And Marvel stopped promoting it on their insides of their pages, right? Until really the Clone Saga, which is more of a cliche and more of a trope than it is kind of like a new story for the character. So, and Miles has a lot of media. Miles has, I would arguably say, has probably the same kind of fan base that, let's say, Venom did from the 90s. That's there. And just needs somebody to give it that extra bump.
I mean, it doesn't hurt. Christopher Cantwell's Iron Man right now. He's featuring Patsy Walker, Hellcat in it a lot. Who's talking
about it? That's the thing. Who's promoting it?
That's true. That is true. But he's still putting her out there. So he's using Iron Man as a vehicle to
and I'm gonna bring this up again. Is Doctor Doom 7 issues?
That went longer.
7 issues. I believe it was 7. Wasn't it 7 or 10? 7 or 10, right?
Yeah, I think it was 10. I know it was double digits.
62. I see in the chat. Pull that trigger on Saga Compendium. You're gonna want it. Pull the trigger. It's the best. I mean, if you're open to looking at something, it's great. It's great. Pick it up. It's one of my favorite books. But it's a little Game of Thrones ish in some concepts that they use. There's a lot.
But you asked who's talking about Campbell's Iron Man, but maybe that's not. It's up to Marvel to really push that. He's already doing his job by giving a lesser known character a voice. It's up to Marvel to really spotlight that and advertise that. So
And I personally think it's really up to Marvel once they give these side characters their time to shine, whether that's in an Avengers book, right? You got to make sure you already have a consistent team that book is buzzing. I'm going to say the Bendis run, because that really did not, it had Iron Man in there, but it really wasn't, Iron Man wasn't the star of the show. Wolverine was on the team, but Wolverine wasn't the star of the show. Right.
See, here's something that's kind of I'll throw this out there, and I don't know if this is necessarily true or not, but there's two kind of things that I think make a better overall kind of let's say, for example, if you use Avengers X-Men is the perfect example because you have Jonathan Hickman as the mastermind for all this stuff. Everyone is free to write their stories, but they have an overarching plan of
you can kind of like play in the playground, but we have to hit these benchmarks.
Yeah, in these benchmarks. So then use the characters to make that benchmark move forward, right? But X-Men's that example. But another one I always appreciated, at least. So I'm a big Star Trek fan, and I read a lot of the books. And at a certain point, I felt like a lot of the books became kind of season 8 of a lot of the like Voyager and DS9, so they had to follow a lot of the things that came with the TV show. So what was really good about it was that you had a creative team, which is writer and editor series, but different writers for a bunch of different books, but they followed along with the kind of path that was laid out already. And I think as a fan of something like that, I really, and maybe this is just me, I love continuity. I love it when they're like, this thing happened and then this one character or whatever comes back. Like say, for example, DS9 in the original series, my favorite episode was the Tribbles one, because they literally got the same actor that played in the original series one to come back as him old, that forced them to, because they took him into custody and then they went back in time because this guy activated something, and then they go back in time to find him because he wanted to get revenge on Kirk. And then they superimposed their images onto an original series episode, which looked so good. But anyway, I love that kind of stuff because they literally got the same actor to come back to reprise the same role years later to do this thing. And I love that kind of continuity, and talking about how to kind of bring in that kind of story arc from different things. You need
to read Alien by Philip Kennedy Johnson then.
Yeah. And you know what? Still, like, the idea is that you have somebody that is in kind of like the leader of the story, like Jonathan Hickman, that knows his beautiful mind, knows all these things and pointing it towards end goal, and it's harder to find than you'd think. So you do need somebody with a vision for the book.
So this is an interesting question. If lesser known publications continue to be silent, do you think they will return to the backup feature, basically like what DC is doing with Justice League Dark? I would say in order for that to happen, the mainstay book has to be strong to make you want to read it. Because I'm not the only one who thinks this, but I love Brian Michael Bendis, but I don't love his Justice League. I will be the first one to say that that is the reason why I'm not reading Justice League Dark, is because I'm not going to pay $5 for a 6-page Justice League Dark story.
Backup feature,
right? if the Justice League book, which is what I'm drawn to, which is what's shown on the cover, was great, I would read Justice League Dark, which is a book that I want to read. I genuinely want to read that book. It's just not financially like reasonable to pay.
Well,
money.
what if they like after whatever their 6 pages stuff is done and they packaged up into just the Justice League Dark backup kind of trade? Like, would that be enough? I'm just,
No, they're gonna print it in trade. They're gonna put that in trade. That's what they did with Jeff Johns' Shazam in the New 52. Got put into a trade.
But I mean, do you think that warrants, like, is that good enough to?
I would say for the Shazam book, yes. I would say for that story, because yes, Jeff Johns is still giving it that treatment. Yes.
Right.
But again, it's all like, is it a cohesive tale? I think that once Justice League Dark comes in that trade, I think like Rom V you'll be able to get the concept of what Rom V is saying.
Right.
But then again, right, you also have to look at what is DC taking a chance on right now. They're using newer characters, newer topics, right? And they're really trying to push a lot of characters in the Suicide Squad. They're trying to push a lot of the Bat family right now, and they're also trying to give voices to this omniverse, right?
Yeah.
So that's what they're doing. For Marvel, I don't think backup stories work. I think Marvel needs to go back to doing, okay, what do we love about the Marvel universe? Is what did you like about, let's say, like Infinity War? You got to see every character. That's the thing about the Marvel universe, is like there are a lot of characters you look at, it's like it makes sense why they're there, right? And you notice that you will always notice a character not being there versus when they're there, right? You can read a book and say this character should have been there, or where has this character been, right? And I think Marvel's doing a good job with those miniseries, and I would like to see them like getting renewed series, right? Let's say Jen Lin Yang with Shang-Chi right now started as a miniseries, and now it's kind of like written in seasons per se. Like I don't know if they changed it to an ongoing. I think they did, but the second volume was supposed to be another mini, right? So that works, right? Because then you can look at the growth between each season.
Well, what about let me ask you this then, like going back to kind of like the side characters and giving them the moment, like what if I don't know if they brought back those Marvel team up books where
that's what they need to do.
Yeah,
thank you. That's an excellent point.
It's literally a book dedicated to kind of like navigating or even
Spider-Man and Dazzler. I would love to, or Spider-Man and you know.
Yeah. I also, as a kid, I loved those Marvel Age books. I don't know if you've seen Marvel Age.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I've read them.
And my favorite thing as a kid reading them was because you got all those origin stories, and I got caught up in knowing who those characters are, you know, and also the similar to the collector cards, the trading cards. As a kid, I had stacks of them, and I'm reading the back. I'm like, oh, I don't know who Night Thrasher is.
And
and that's how they brought Captain Britain into the Marvel universe, was through that book.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And again, that's a great point, you know, bringing in those, because you're already going to buy the books as Spider-Man. We kind of touched on that earlier. How whenever these companies see a Spider-Man book, whenever the company has a chance to produce a Spider-Man story, or a Batman story, or let's say a Trinity story versus like a Avengers or Spider-Man, they're going to do it because it financially makes more sense, right? So I think we can combine that. Right, what we're saying now is also different ways so that they can navigate that. You also need a creative team, because Marvel tried to bring in the 2-in-1, but they didn't. But this is when
it was focused on a certain set of characters.
It was focused on Kamala. It was not that it was focused on Kamala Khan, but it was focused on something that really wasn't. It was like a very out of pocket thing that reached way more than it really could have. And I read it. I picked it up. It was a Spider-Man and Kamala Khan, but they like switched roles, and it was like really weird. I was like, what?
I thought you were talking about the Zdarsky Fantastic
No.
Four one, okay.
That was 2-in-1, and that was a 12-issue mini, which was great, and that was just a Ben Grimm and Human Torch-esque story. Which,
but the idea of that, like an anthology series where you can have Spider-Man, Wolverine, Cap, Iron Man, Batman, Superman, the popular characters team up with lesser known characters would be a great way, because everyone's winning at the end of the day. You're getting your popular characters out there, people are going to see these characters, want to pick up the book, but you're also giving a vehicle for lesser known.
I think editorial, and you also got to think about this, which is why Marvel team up would be great. Readers, we're in a day and age where we have the most impatient readers. I'm sorry, but every single, myself included, are very impatient. We're so quick to judge a book based off one issue and say the whole series,
the whole story,
right? Like, let's say I'm going to use Excalibur for example, just because Marcus is here. Let's say we're 13 issues into the run. Issue 14 is coming out. I don't like issue 14. This book sucks. I'm gonna give it a really bad review, and that's also credited to a lot of YouTube creators who do that. Right, who shit on a book, say, I'm putting it down, boom, don't pick it up. But you're not going to give it be patient, because these stories take time to develop. How long did it take Secret Invasion to develop? How long did it take even, let's say, Siege? How long did it take for Ultimate Spider-Man to really gain its momentum? Even Jeff Johns' Justice League.
No, right? I agree with you on that. And ending, I don't think people realize how important endings can be. Like, you can have a series can be amazing. For example, Dexter or Weeds both started off phenomenal, but towards the end, the endings were a little shaky.
I always give you good reviews.
And it kind of tarnished the legacy of said series. But then you have something like Breaking Bad, where it started off strong and ended strong, and its legacy is one of the best shows ever to have been on air. It's so, you're right. Like, people shouldn't, just because a start of a story or an issue isn't where you think it should be, or it didn't really hit you, it's like, wait, read the whole story. Like, that's what you should be judging on.
So let's ask the chat. We got 13 people in the chat, 14 people, 15, however many. How long does it take you guys till you drop a book? Do you give it the first issue? I personally give it the first arc, right? And even if I don't like it, or even if it's not cost efficient for me to pick up, I will buy it in trade, because that's the way I am, or I will read it digitally, just to have it. But I know digital sales really don't mean anything in the consistency of a printed out book, right? So how long do you guys typically give a book, right?
Right.
And it's interesting, because, like you said, TV shows is exactly kind of the perfect example of this. And whenever you read a review, you always wonder. One thing I hate about reviews, and I know you guys review books, and don't get me wrong, I'm not one to review anything, but I don't like hearing, I don't know where this is going. I'm not sure if you should know where this is going when you're reading a book. Like, I mean, like, that's the point.
That's the point, right? No.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I would think is the point. I don't want to know what's going to happen, right? Like, I want you to lead me along.
You're right. Absolutely.
So we got like 5 minimum to 5 to 10, right?
I do the arc. That way you can judge the whole story on its own, instead of like, if you've read 3-4 issues and it ends in 6, but the payoff was in the final issues or the hook, you're not doing yourself a favor, But
when I review a book, I don't really like it. Oh, where's it going to go from here, right? Because obviously, I'm gonna leave that up to where this story takes me, right? So I'm involving myself in the book, so I'm not gonna speculate. Oh, I don't know where it's going. Screw it. It's not gonna have. And here's the problem with a lot of creators today. I know this channel, we are 100% about the books. Many other channels that are much bigger than this one, I'm not calling anyone out because I respect everybody, no bad blood whatsoever, are about, will it retain the dollar value 5 years down the road? What does it bring? If it doesn't bring a first appearance, it's a shit book. That's not the case. I don't do that. I look at, what does this book do well? What happened in the story? What moments did I like? How did the artist work their panels in telling this story, right? How did the writer kind of give each character space, or were the characters just there to be there? How did was this a blatant editorial move, right? That's kind of what I look at it. If you guys do watch Weekly Wrap Up, we walk you through the stories, and even if we don't like the issue, we still let you form your own opinion because we told you what happened in different parts of the story. Right. We do got a by artists and floppies want to read it, but 5 or 6. So we're getting like kind of into that 5 territory. But there are a lot of people out there, right, that depend on, okay, what does this bigger person think of my book? Which is very daunting.
But here's the thing too, and I wonder, going back to the TV, right? One of the things I love to watch in general is the pilot episode, because the pilot episode is not even episode 1, in my opinion, right? It's really just everything that you want, and the crafting of a pilot episode is really interesting, because you have, say, half an hour or 45 minutes or whatever the length of the show is, but you have one episode to both introduce your character, what they're about, and then the inciting incident that moves them forward in that small little bit to show you kind of what the theme of the overall series is going to be about moving forward. And one of the best ones I've always found was Naruto, and because it's for kids, generally for kids, I like to use that because that's kind of what I would be aiming to do. So what the best thing was is that you've introduced him in the world that he's in a very limited space that you yourself can understand, even though it's more of a fantastic place. Because he's a student, he's not doing well in school, and he's kind of like that, shithead kind of like class clown. And then you realize that he's just a lonely boy with no parents. And then so you care about him immediately from that. You understand it because most of us have been to school.
Can identify,
Most of us have been bullied, even though this is a ninja school, but it doesn't matter because it's all established. And then the inciting incident of him trying to steal this thing so that other people, so he could show that he's good enough.
He's worth it,
Exactly. Yep. And then at the very end of the episode where he really does the thing and then shows that he's a good kid, and he changed the mind of this one character. And very simple, like straightforward, all the information is there, but all of a sudden in 30 minutes you cared about that character.
Yep.
Right?
Live action Mask of Phantasm, make it happen, Brandon. I got you, brother.
And I wonder if comics should do more.
That's what we do here. We take concepts that because I know somewhere out there who's in charge of DC's whatever. Shoot, Jim Lee. What's up, Jim Lee? I know you're watching. Just make it happen already. I don't know, but and I do think like tying like TV to comics, right, and testing readers' patience. I would say as readers, we need to be more thoughtful. And even as reviewers, right? Even if you're a content creator watching this, it's your job, right? Your job is informing, right? When you're informing, you have to we all have opinions, but there's a difference between separating your opinion and ruining someone else's experience.
Yeah.
So you got to learn how to be more objective when you're talking about this. Like this conversation could be very opinionated. Do this book, book, don't do this character, don't do this character. But our job today is to kind of brainstorm and evaluate how we can make some of our, not necessarily like our favorites, but characters that, have potential, that have had like kind of bits and pieces. How can we grow them? How can companies make them to get them to sell, right? How can we get new readers to admire these characters? To get those like Miles Morales fan bases, those Lethal Protector fan bases, right? Even like the all new Wolverine fan bases, I'll even throw in there, right? To have those niche fan bases, right? And to have,
sometimes it falls on the reader. Sometimes we as readers have preconceived notions of how we think characters should be. Like Marcus said it earlier, it's the writer telling the story that they're setting out to tell. Right. Maybe it's not, that's not how you think the character should be, but as long as the writer or the creative team are hitting their goal of the story they set out to tell.
And to your point, I'm going to piss off a lot of people by saying this, Tim Drake and John Kent, right? How many people went to Twitter right after? How many content creators went to Twitter right after vocalizing their opinion on a book they didn't even read yet? Right? How can you judge a move by a singular issue in the grand scheme of a larger story?
Yeah. Right. Not to mention this though too. I mean, like, there was arguments of they should be with this person instead of that person. I mean, like, who out of us have never had a bad dating experience?
I mean, I like to think I'm a 10 out of 10, Marcus. So
Well, even if you were, you could have a bad experience with somebody else. Like, we're not always meant to be. We don't always find who we're meant to be with until many mistakes gone by.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about writing stories with that, and how fans perhaps believe that this person should be with that person, or this person should be written this way, or whatever the case might be. I sometimes it makes me wonder. I'm like, I think that's why they don't end up together. It's because they want to build those
that suspense. Marcus is like, right now, I'm glad I don't write. He's like, I'm glad I just draw it.
Yeah, I know. I just draw it. Trust me. I use that excuse all the time. I just draw the thing. I don't make any decisions.
But that's also why I like having you on this conversation in particular, because you kind of have that knowledge. Okay, what is the writer's point of view, but also like, what is my job as the artist to spotlight this character? You could easily, like, let's say let Betsy Braddock is more of a mainstay character than Richter, right? But as the artist, you can position Richter in a certain way to make him stand out in a particular moment, or make him look cooler, right?
Yeah.
Like you did the Hellfire Gala designs for them, right? So it was ultimately kind of your job to make that character look relevant, look cool, look like, oh, that's a character I want to read.
Speak to their personality, yeah.
Well, it's funny because that I did criticize on that design too, because.
But I love Richter's design. He was just a little saucy teenager. It was great.
Well, here's what I wanted to come out of that, is because this is how I saw a lot of their designs. Okay, it's a party, right?
Right.
And we've all been to a party. Doesn't have to be a gala event, but there's always a party. Now, in your group of friends, there's the one that wants the party. There's the one that's only there because they're supposed to be there. There's one that doesn't want to go, but everyone else drags them to go. And then there's one that's kind of there, and then there's a couple sprinkled in just to cause shit, right? So, and we've been to parties, plenty of them. And what I told you, that's pretty accurate, I would argue. And at the end of the night, through the party, shit happens. Someone's crying. Someone drank too much. Someone got in a fight.
Oh, we saw Nightcrawler.
so to me, those are very truthful events, in my opinion, of all the parties I've been to. And then at the end of the night, somehow you wind up with who you're supposed to wind up with. And then that's how we looked at it.
Put the same powerhouse creative team that you would on Spider-Man and Batman. New character you want to elevate. Tom Taylor and Bruno done great for Nightwing. Amen. 100%. I'm with it.
Yeah, but did you know who Bruno was before Nightwing? Like realistically, I mean, maybe
Suicide Squad,
Brandon, but that's what I mean. I wouldn't say. I wouldn't necessarily say he was a.
He drew Darth Maul.
No,
Tom
not
Taylor.
at all.
Right,
but that
he wasn't like a
household name, yeah.
Right. I would even say Russell Dodderman wasn't really no one before Thor.
Sure, and there's something to be said about an editorial team that knows how to spot the ones that have the look and the voice that match the fan base. Not even match the character, I'd argue.
Right.
You would match the fan base that would want to see that look.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and well said, and I think we've basically hit everything that we've wanted to in this conversation. So thank you guys for tuning in tonight. It was a great Whiplash Wednesday. Make sure you guys check out everything on the replay. If you're catching this live, hit the thumbs up button. I'm supposed to say this because I do this YouTube thing. Hit the subscribe button, like it, because if you guys are here, you're naturally going to do it. I get it, right? Or if you made it this far, you're good at just what's one more thing, right? But anyway, make sure you check out all Whiplash Wednesdays, and also make sure you guys go follow AWA Upshot over Instagram, Twitter, all their socials, picking up their books. You're going to be hearing a lot more of our friends over at AWA on weekly wrap-up, so I'm very excited for that as well. Creators Corner announcements, big day for that, which I can finally talk about. Leah Williams will be on November 4th. Okay,
awesome.
Nice. I know, I love Leah. Mark's like, oh, she's awesome. I love her. And then we have, following that, we have Jim Shooter November 10th. Following Jim Shooter, we have Marv Wolfman November 19th. Following Marv Wolfman, we have James DeMatteis December 4th. And that's all I have right now.
Heavy hitters. Heavy hitters.
So, Marcus, what do you have going on?
Nothing. Nothing I can talk about.
Nothing you can talk about. Great. So
I'll just say Marvel and Marvel Comics for now.
So Marvel likes Marcus. We like Marcus, and we're all happy. So Marcus, when you know more, you know you're always welcome to come back on the show and talk about whatever you're doing.
Sounds good to me. We'll have a Cell show.
Oh yeah, we'll have a we'll have a show. We'll have a show. Okay. Stefan, what's up with you, bro?
Just do a show with
me.
This guy.
Yeah. And we have archives coming out on Friday, which we have 3 Jokers, which is a great conversation.
Yes, with Bryce. Yeah.
With Bryce, the other Comics King. So Comics Kings is the 3 of us. You guys don't know, now you know. And so thank you guys for your support as always. Station, everybody.
Station.